The alarm started at 600-hour station time. Commander Sarah Chen was lifting her coffee when the first warning flashed across her data pad, and for one strange second her hand simply stopped in the air as though her body had refused to believe what her eyes had already understood. The cup trembled. A dark ripple crossed the surface. She read the line again, and with each pass the words became less like a report and more like a blade sliding between her ribs. Unidentified vessels entering system. Multiple contacts. Military configuration. She set the cup down so quickly that hot coffee splashed across the table. Then she was moving, already out of her quarters, already halfway down the corridor toward command before the fear had finished forming into a name. New Horizon Station was small by galactic standards, a ring of steel and glass on the edge of human space, more research outpost than fortress, more home than battlefield. 847 people lived here. Scientists, engineers, miners, families, children. It had 2 light defense platforms and a schedule full of crop studies or projections and atmospheric analysis. It had never once needed soldiers. The command center was already alive when she stepped through the hatch. Voices overlapped, consoles pulsed, red icons multiplied across the main display. Lieutenant Marcus Webb looked up from his station and the color had drained so thoroughly from his face that he seemed carved from ash. "Commander, we have 15 ships, big ones, military-class cruisers, no response to hail." Sarah crossed to the main screen and stared at the formation tightening against the black. 15 red contacts gliding inward in perfect alignment, too disciplined for radar, too deliberate for coincidence. Her stomach locked hard. "Keep trying," she said. "All frequencies. Civilian priority channel. Tell them exactly what we are." Alice Porter was already at communications, fingers moving fast, voice level in the way only trained professionals and terrified people could manage. "Unknown vessels, this is New Horizon Station. We are a civilian research facility. We are not armed for military engagement. Please identify yourselves and state your intention." For 30 seconds there was only static. Then the answer arrived. The face that filled the screen was reptilian, scaled in dark green with yellow eyes that looked less alive than sharpened metal. When it spoke, its voice sounded like stone dragged over iron. "Human Station. I am War Master Zether of the Krell Dominion. This system now belongs to the Krell. You will evacuate immediately. You have 1 hour to abandon your station and leave this space. Any who remain will be destroyed." The room went still around Sarah. She had heard of the Krell. Everyone had. Expansion through conquest. Occupation followed by extraction. Entire systems bent at gunpoint. But this was neutral space. Legal claims had been filed. Council recognition had been granted. There were procedures, registries, jurisdiction. She heard herself answer in a voice calmer than she felt. "War Master, this system is unclaimed by any sovereign government. We have legal mining rights recognized by the Galactic Council. We cannot abandon years of research and infrastructure. Perhaps we can negotiate shared access." Zether's eyes narrowed with something colder than anger. "You misunderstand, human. This is not a negotiation. This is an order. You have 1 hour. The screen went black. Everyone in command looked at her then. Not at the display. Not at the ships. At her. Waiting for someone to say this could still be fixed. Sarah thought of her daughter asleep in their quarters. Maya tangled in blankets with one arm around the stuffed animal she had insisted on bringing from Earth. 9 years old, too young to understand territory disputes or military threats or why adults always lie to children by calling dangerous places opportunities. She thought of every other child on the station, all the people who had come here to study life, not lose it. "Give me Earth command," she said, "emergency channel, and start evacuation procedures. Move everyone to the escape pods now." The next 45 minutes became a blur of motion and panic and orders spoken too quickly to feel real. Corridors filled with running footsteps and frightened voices. Scientists stumbled along clutching data drives as if years of work could still matter in the face of what was coming. Engineers raced through prep checklists. Parents carried children wrapped in blankets. Somewhere a baby was crying so hard the sound cut through bulkheads. New Horizon had 20 escape pods. 50 people per pod if they packed them in tight. 1,000 seats. They had 847 souls on the station. Was possible. For one thin, desperate stretch of minutes it was possible. Then the Krell attacked. They did not wait the full hour. They waited 47 minutes. The first missile slammed into the station's power core, and the lights died so fast the world seemed to blink. Emergency systems kicked in a heartbeat later, bathing the command center in violent red. The deck heaved under Sarah's boots. Somewhere behind her a console burst in sparks. Marcus shouted over the alarms. "They're firing, all platforms. They're targeting the escape pods." Sarah turned to the tactical display just in time to watch the first cluster of blue launch signals rise from the station. Then 3 of them vanished. "What? They're shooting them as they launch," Marcus said, and now his voice had broken. 3 destroyed. 4. 5. Dot was 50 people. Each flash was a pod becoming a coffin. "Launch all remaining pods," Sarah snapped. "Evasive pattern, scatter them, use station debris for cover. Move." But the Krell had positioned themselves too well. They had ships on every vector, weapons already locked, firing solutions prepared before the first civilian ever reached a hatch. Pod after pod burst apart against the darkness. Silent on the display. Final in a way sound could never improve. 16 launched. 15 destroyed. 17 launched. 16 destroyed. The station was dying around them. Another explosion ripped through the deck. Smoke rolled down the corridor. Sarah heard screaming somewhere beyond the command center doors. Then Alice shouted, voice cracking with sudden disbelief. "Pod 19 is away." Sarah looked up. 1 dot still moving. Small. Fast. Hiding inside the expanding cloud of station debris while Krell fire tore wreckage into glittering fragments around it. "Pod 20 launching now," Marcus said. That dot lived for less than 3 seconds. Pod 20 vanished in a white pulse so brief it barely looked real. For half a second Sarah stared at the screen as if refusal alone could force the dot to reappear. It did not. The tactical display kept updating with machine precision, indifferent to what each disappearing light meant. 50 more gone. 50 more names that would never be spoken again except in lists, in reports, in grieving voices that had not yet learned what they had lost. "Pod 19 is still moving," Marcus said, and there was something desperate in the way he said it, as though one surviving point of light could hold back the collapse of the entire world. Sarah locked onto it. The pod was weaving through drifting metal, using the station's own corpse as cover while Krell fire lanced past it in bright murderous streaks. Was not a plan. It was instinct. What? Chaos buying seconds. Then the main screen exploded. A shower of sparks burst across the command center. Sarah threw up her arm too late and felt heat skate across her sleeve. The deck lurched violently left. Somewhere inside the walls came the long, hideous scream of tearing metal, the sound of a structure realizing it was already dead. "Hull breach," someone shouted. Multiple breaches. Sections 7 through 12 venting. Emergency klaxons merged into one continuous scream. The air filled with smoke and the bitter stink of burning insulation. Sarah grabbed the edge of her console, fighting for balance as gravity flickered. Her hand slipped on spilled coffee and blood that was not hers. For a moment she could not tell which was which. All hands, she snapped into her communicator. "Get to emergency shelters now. Seal all." She stopped. A schematic had appeared on her damaged console, blinking through static. Residential ring. Sector C pressure loss catastrophic. Her eyes found the unit number before her mind did. Maya's room. Everything in her went silent. "Maya," she whispered. Then she ran. She left command without ceremony, without handing over authority, without saying a word to anyone who called after her. The corridor outside was red and choking with smoke. People slammed fists against sealed bulkheads. A child screamed for his father somewhere behind a jammed hatch. A woman was dragging an older man by the arms, heels scraping uselessly on the deck as intermittent gravity fought with decompression. Sarah saw all of it and none of it. Every instinct that had made her a commander, every discipline built over years of crisis response and hard decisions, narrowed into one savage need. Get to Maya. She sprinted through corridors littered with debris and floating shards of plastic. A fire suppression unit sparked overhead and sprayed foam into open air. Somewhere deeper in the station, a secondary explosion boomed through the structure and the floor jumped beneath her boots. She kept going. Past a cracked viewport showing stars where walls should have been. Past bodies turning slowly in pockets of lost gravity. Past a young engineer trying to pry open an emergency door with bleeding hands. Residential Sector C was 3 junctions away when the corridor ahead bulged inward like thin metal punched by a giant fist. Sarah had time to understand missile, nothing else. The hull ruptured in a shriek of steel and pressure. The blast hit her like a god's open hand. One moment she was running, the next she was airborne, tumbling backward through smoke and flashing red light. Something hard struck the side of her head. The world snapped white. When consciousness returned, there was no up or down. Sarah opened her eyes to stars. For one impossible second, she thought she was dead, but then pain arrived all at once. Sharp in her ribs, deep in her shoulder, a crushing ache in her skull. Her emergency suit had deployed automatically. A thin survival shell sealed around her body. Her breath sounded too loud inside the helmet. Frost feathered the edge of her visor. She was floating in open space. New Horizon Station burned in front of her. Not station wreckage. It turned slowly against the black, broken into sections, fires blooming in ruptured compartments, fragments spinning away in long, glittering trails. The place she had lived for 3 years, the place people had decorated with children's drawings and plant samples and birthday banners and family photos, had become twisted metal and venting atmosphere. Krell warships circled the ruin with the patient confidence of predators feeding. They were still firing, even now, even after the pods, even after the station had already been gutted. Her communicator crackled. "Any survivors? This is Pod 19. Any survivors, please respond." Sarah jerked, fumbled for the transmit control with gloved fingers that suddenly did not seem to belong to her. "This is Commander Chin," she said, and her own voice sounded distant, thin, almost unrecognizable. "I'm here, I'm alive." A burst of static, then a man's voice shaking with relief. "Commander, thank God, we have you on suit telemetry, we're coming back for survivors." "No," the word came out hard enough to surprise even her. There was a pause. "Commander, you do not come back," she said. "You run, you get to Earth, you tell them what happened here, you tell them everything." Silence, static, breathing. Then the reply came softer. "Commander, your daughter is with us." Sarah stopped breathing. "Maya made it to the pod," the voice said. "She's here, she's alive, she's safe." Her eyes closed. For a moment all she could see was Maya in her winter pajamas, hair messy, asking if the stars looked different out here because they were lonely too. Tears broke free and floated inside her helmet in tiny shining spheres. "Alive. One thing alive." "Then you definitely run," Sarah whispered. "Keep her safe, get her home, and when you reach Earth tell them what the Krell did." "We will." The pod's drive signature flared against the darkness, small and brilliant. Then it vanished into faster than light. Sarah Chin floated alone in the wreckage of New Horizon Station and watched the last proof of her daughter's survival vanish into the dark. For a few seconds, maybe longer, she let herself hold that single fact as though it were warmth. Maya was alive. Maya was heading home. Maya had escaped the nightmare that had swallowed everyone else. Around Sarah, pieces of the station drifted in slow, terrible silence. Shattered hull plates, broken equipment, someone's storage case split open so papers and photographs turned lazily in vacuum like pale leaves in a dead season. The Krell ships kept circling. Their weapon fire still flashed now and then into the debris field, not because anything living remained to fight them, but because cruelty had momentum of its own. Her breathing sounded ragged inside the suit. Her head hurt. One side of her vision pulsed with blood. Every heartbeat reminded her that she was still alive when almost everyone she had been responsible for was not. She thought of the command center, of Alice at communications, of Marcus trying to keep his voice steady while escape pods died on his screen, of Dr. Patterson carrying children toward the launch bay, of all the people who had trusted her because trusting the commander was easier than admitting no one was coming. Then a shape moved through the wreckage toward her. At first she thought it was another fragment of the station turning in the light, but then it corrected course. Controlled, deliberate, a figure in a dark armored suit, compact thrusters firing in short cold bursts. Krell. The soldier came to a stop a few meters away and leveled a weapon at her chest. Sarah did not move. In another life, in another story, maybe this was where a victim begged. Maybe this was where fear stripped dignity away and left only survival instinct and broken promises to gods that had never answered anyone in time. But there was no survival here. No bargain, no escape pod, No last-minute rescue, only witness. Through the visor she could see its eyes. Yellow, reptilian, incurious. Not angry, not even excited. It looked at her the way a technician might look at damaged equipment scheduled for disposal. That more than the attack, more than the burning station, more than the pods exploding one by one, reached something hard and final inside her. This was not war to them. This was instruction. She straightened in the void, forcing her spine rigid despite the pain. She thought of Maya, not as she had seen her last. Running with an emergency bag and tears in her eyes, but younger. Small boots on polished station floors. Laughing because she had decided low gravity made everyone walk like confused birds. Sarah held that memory like a blade she could grip without bleeding. The Krell soldier's weapon remained fixed on her center mass. "You have made a mistake," Sarah said. Her voice carried over short-range comms, clear despite the blood in her mouth and the trembling in her hands. The soldier tilted its head, perhaps translating, perhaps amused. Sarah kept going. "Earth will come for you." No answer. It did not understand. Of course it did not. To the Krell, humanity was a species of negotiators and researchers and patient voices in council chambers asking for fairness from creatures who understood only leverage. They had looked at New Horizon and seen weakness. They had looked at escape pods and seen targets. They had looked at civilians and seen a lesson to broadcast. Sarah's eyes locked on the creatures. "And when they do," she said, every word cut from the center of her, "you will understand what it means to wake a sleeping dragon." For the first time something shifted in those yellow eyes. Not fear, not yet. Perhaps only confusion that prey was speaking like prophecy. Then the Krell fired. The impact hit like a star hammer swung through her chest. Pain did not bloom, it detonated. Her body jerked backward, suit alarms shrieking into static as the seal ruptured and heat became ice in an instant. The stars lurched. New Horizons' wreckage spun across her vision, bright and blurred. She thought she might scream, but there was no air left for it. Her last thought was not of the soldier, not of pain, not even of the station. It was of Maya crossing the dark toward Earth carrying the truth. Aboard the Krell flagship, War Master Zether watched the final destruction of New Horizon with quiet satisfaction. The station had ceased to exist as anything recognizable. Fires guttered in drifting metal. Wreckage spread through the system like ash after a ritual burning. The human presence here was over. More importantly, the message was clear. This was what happened to anyone who stood in the path of the Krell Dominion. He ordered the footage compiled and broadcast across known space. Let every frontier governor, every council official, every species tempted to resist watch civilian escape pods burn and learn the proper cost of defiance. Behind him, officers moved efficiently at their stations, already discussing supply counts and future targets. The first officer stepped closer and bowed his head. "War Master, shall we continue to the next human outpost?" Zether considered it. They had fuel, ammunition, momentum. Human stations in the region were lightly defended, easy prey if panic had not already emptied them. But something faint and irritating lingered at the edge of his thoughts. The human commander in the spacesuit. Her final tone, not begging, not pleading, warning. He dismissed it. Humans were talkers, diplomats, explorers with soft hands and slower instincts. They would protest through the Galactic Council. They would demand hearings. Perhaps issue sanctions if they found enough allies willing to pretend outrage mattered. But fight a real war. No, species like that did not choose fire when fear would let them kneel. "No," Zether said at last. "Return to Krell Prime. This victory is sufficient." The flagship turned for home. Behind it, New Horizon drifted in pieces. Ahead of it, Earth was listening. Pod 19 reached Earth 3 days later. By then, the survivors were dehydrated, shaking, and running almost entirely on the stubborn animal refusal to collapse before the truth had been delivered. Medical teams were waiting at the landing platform when the pod hatch opened, but for one suspended second, no one moved. The silence around the scarred little vessel felt wrong, as if the world itself already sensed that something too large to name had arrived inside it. Then they saw the child. Maya Chin came down the ramp wrapped in a thermal blanket, clutching a worn stuffed animal so tightly its fabric had nearly torn at the seams. Her face was smudged with ash. There was dried blood on one sleeve that did not belong to her. She looked less like a survivor than like evidence. Behind her came 11 others, each carrying the same hollow stare people wore when their minds had accepted the facts, but their bodies had not yet understood they were still alive. There should have been 847. There were 12. The debrief began before the pod was fully secured. They told Earth about the unknown ships entering the system without warning. They told Earth about the 1-hour ultimatum that had become 47 minutes. They told Earth about escape pods launching under civilian emergency protocols and being shot out of space one by one. They told Earth that this had not been battle, had not been confusion, had not been collateral damage under pressure. It had been systematic, deliberate, the careful murder of non-combatants trying to flee. When they reached the part about the children, the room went silent in a different way. Then they played Sarah Chin's final transmission, not the warning to the Krell soldier. That died with her in the wreckage. The other one, the command to Pod 19. Run. Get to Earth. Tell them what happened here. By the time the first full report reached the upper levels of Terran command, the official casualty number had stabilized. 835 dead. Among them researchers, engineers, station support staff, maintenance crews, miners, medics, and entire families who had signed civilian frontier contracts because humanity had believed the edge of its space was rough, not murderous. Many of the dead were parents. Some were children. All of them had been unarmed. Across human networks, the story spread faster than any censors could have contained, even if anyone had tried. New Horizons Station, civilian massacre, escape pods destroyed, commander dead, child survivor. Every headline was a wound. Every name released to the public was another house going dark. The Galactic Council responded exactly the way old institutions always responded when barbarity arrived, wrapped in legal inconvenience. Messages of condolence, condemnation of excessive force, appeals for calm, urgent recommendations for restraint while an inquiry could be convened and responsibility assigned through proper channels. Earth did not answer. Across human space, channels that usually hummed with diplomatic traffic began falling silent one by one. Civilian relays stopped forwarding council requests. Frontier offices ceased replying. Defense networks locked down. Public broadcasters ran names of the dead and footage of New Horizons wreckage with no commentary at all, as if commentary would have insulted the dead by pretending words could share the weight. At Terran Defense Fleet headquarters, Admiral Marcus Cross stood in his office and looked out at Earth hanging blue and impossibly peaceful beyond the glass. On his desk lay a data pad listing the dead from New Horizon. 847 profiles had been assigned to the station roster. 835 were now framed in black. He had read the list twice, then a third time, not because he needed the information, but because he wanted each face to pass through his mind before he made what came next real. Smiling pictures stared back at him from happier days. A botanist in station coveralls holding an alien flower, a husband and wife beside mining equipment, 2 children missing their front teeth. Commander Sarah Chen in formal uniform, expression steady, eyes direct. 9-year-old Maya listed below her under surviving dependents. His aide entered quietly. Admiral, the council is convening. They want your preliminary before drafting a response. Cross did not turn. What are the casualty numbers? Confirmed dead stands at 835, sir. He kept looking at Earth. And the pod footage, verified, multiple angles. The Krell were targeting escape vectors intentionally. No battle haze, no confusion, no fog of war to hide behind. They had waited until civilians were trapped, then used the evacuation as target practice. Cross felt something cold and heavy settle into place inside him. Not rage exactly and not grief either. Those were earlier emotions, hotter and less useful. This was worse for the enemy. This was decision. Send a recall order, he said. The aide hesitated, sir. Every fleet asset, every warship, every escort, every strategic reserve vessel. Bring them home. Full armament authorization. Full logistics mobilization. I want everything that can fight turned toward Earth. The aide swallowed. What should I tell the Galactic Council, now cross-turned? His eyes were dry or certain. Tell them Earth is busy. The aide's expression changed. Not confusion, recognition. He understood the shape of the sentence before he fully understood its consequences. Busy doing what, sir? Cross looked down at the data pad one last time, at the faces of the dead, at the children who had never reached safety, at the commander who had bought the truth with her life. Then he set the pad flat on the desk and answered in a voice so quiet it forced the room to lean toward him, demonstrating that there are consequences for massacring our people. The Terran Council chamber had never felt this small. 200 representatives sat beneath the white arc of the ceiling while the largest screen in the room showed a child trying not to break in front of the adults who had failed her. No one shifted. No one whispered. Even the air seemed reluctant to move. Maya Chen sat wrapped in a blanket that looked too large for her. Her dark hair was tangled. Dried blood marked one cuff. A trauma counselor beside her held one of her hands, but the girl kept the other clenched around a stuffed animal, as if letting go of it would mean letting go of the last piece of home that had survived. When the interviewer spoke, his voice was gentle. To hurt. Maya, can you tell us what happened? She wiped at her nose with the blanket. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but she answered anyway because children often did the cruel work adults asked of them without understanding why the adults could not bear to do it themselves. The alarms went off, she said. Mommy told me to get my emergency bag and go to the escape pods. She said she had to help other people first. She said she would meet me there. No one in the chamber moved. Did you make it to the pods? Maya nodded. A nice man carried me because I was scared. His name was Dr. Patterson. He studied plants. He showed me pictures of alien flowers. Her voice shrank. He went back to help more people. On the data pads in front of the council members, Dr. James Patterson's name was already marked among the dead. What happened after launch? The girl's mouth trembled. There were explosions everywhere. People were screaming. I saw the other pods through the window. She stopped trying to swallow around something too large for a child to swallow. They blew up. The interviewer waited, but Maya forced the words out anyway. The Krell ships were shooting them. They were shooting the pods. Around the chamber, heads lowered. A woman in the European delegation covered her mouth. A representative from the Pacific Union removed his glasses and pressed shaking fingers to his eyes. No one spoke because no one could improve on the image already forming in every mind. Pods full of civilians, children targeted. Did you see your mother again? The interviewer asked softly. Maya shook her head. Tears ran down her face. She called on the radio. She said she loved me. She said to be brave. The little girl folded in on herself for a second, then looked straight at the camera with a heartbreak so clear it felt like accusation. She said Earth would come for us. She said Earth would make it right. The screen went dark. For several seconds the chamber remained silent, not because protocol required it, but because every person present had to decide who they were now that they had heard a child place a moral burden on an entire world. Secretary General David Okonkwo rose slowly from his chair. He had been elected 15 years earlier because he was calm when others escalated, diplomatic when others threatened, and patient enough to pull compromise from rooms full of enemies. Today, none of those qualities showed on his face. He looked carved rather than living. You have seen the evidence, he said. 835 human beings were murdered, not in battle, not in declared war. They were civilians, researchers, engineers, families. They attempted evacuation. Their escape pods were destroyed in flight. He let that sit. The Galactic Council urges restraint. They call for dialogue, investigation, proportionality. They ask us to be measured. The chamber held still. Okonkwo's hands tightened around the podium. I ask you instead, what message do we send to the galaxy if the murder of our children is answered with paperwork? That broke the room open. A representative from the North American Union stood first. No one is suggesting we ignore this atrocity, but full war with the Krell Dominion could cost millions more lives. Millions of Krell lives, someone answered from the African coalition, voice cold as steel. I find my concern for that has diminished. Others rose. Some called for sanctions, blockades, asset seizures, immediate war crimes petitions to the council. Others demanded an armed expedition, limited strikes, decapitation of Krell military command. One delegate called for patience and was shouted down before he could finish his second sentence. Grief and rage moved through the chamber in waves, colliding, reforming, searching for a shape that could carry both justice and survival. Then Admiral Marcus Cross stood. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The chamber quieted around him the way a battlefield sometimes went quiet when something larger than noise entered it. 23 years ago, he said, walking to the center aisle, I commanded a destroyer escorting a colony ship when pirates boarded it. I had a choice. Chase the raiders or stay and defend civilians under bad odds. I stayed. We lost 30 sailors. We saved 2,000 colonists. He looked around the room. People called that a victory. What I learned was simpler. If you have the power to protect the innocent and you fail to use it, then every grave that follows belongs partly to you. He held up a data pad containing New Horizons' roster. We told those people the frontier was safe. We told them humanity could protect them. We were wrong. No one interrupted him. We are now faced with a second choice. Write letters. Attend hearings. Wait for the same institutions that watched our people die to explain why action would be regrettable. Or make sure no species ever believes this can be done to us again. The words hung in the chamber like a blade. On every screen, a document appeared. Protocol Nightfall. Admiral Marcus Cross let the title sit on every screen long enough for the room to feel its weight. Protocol Nightfall. Some representatives had heard rumors of it before, spoken in the careful tones people reserved for contingency plans that existed only so no one would ever have to use them. Most had not. Now the document glowed in front of them with the quiet certainty of something written years ago by a man who had hoped his own foresight would never be tested. This is a full-spectrum military response plan, Cross said, designed for a scenario in which a hostile power demonstrates clear intent to exterminate or systematically prey upon human civilians. It authorizes complete fleet mobilization, suspension of normal rules of engagement, and the removal of any state capability that can credibly threaten human population centers. A representative from the Asian coalition rose first. Admiral, are you proposing genocide? The word hit the chamber and stayed there. Cross turned toward the speaker without flinching. No, I am proposing that we remove the Krell Dominion's ability to ever do this again. He touched the screen and a second layer of intelligence files appeared. Intercepted military traffic, strategic projections, frontier maps marked with human stations. Before New Horizon, he said, our intelligence services intercepted Krell military planning regarding 7 additional human outposts. New Horizon was not an isolated act. It was a test, a demonstration attack to measure our response. If we had answered with hearings and petitions, they intended to expand operations across the frontier within the month. The chamber changed shape at that, not emotionally, structurally. Doubt no longer sat where it had been sitting. Even those still uneasy now had to grapple with a harder truth. Restraint was not asked in exchange for peace. It was being asked in exchange for permission to be prey. Cross continued. 47 human stations exist in vulnerable sectors. More than 40,000 civilians live on them. If we do nothing meaningful, this massacre becomes precedent. A representative from South America stood. Then the council must be informed. We demand emergency sanctions, joint enforcement, fleet pressure from every neutral government. The Galactic Council already knows. Cross cut in. Their answer was restraint. No one argued. He moved one file aside and brought up another, a paused frame from the Krell broadcast. Warmaster Zethar standing before the burning remains of New Horizon while human bodies drifted in the background like refuse. They did not hide this, Cross said. They celebrated it. They distributed it as an example. Secretary General Okonkwo's face hardened another degree. Play the clip. The chamber watched the Krell Warmaster speak about power, conquest, and the destruction of anyone who resisted. Watched soldiers celebrate. Watched the dead of New Horizon turned into stage dressing for Imperial Theater. When the footage ended, there was no outrage left in the room. Outrage was too thin, too temporary. What remained was colder. A representative from the European alliance spoke into that silence. "If we approve this, what precisely happens?" Cross answered without ornament. "Every human warship is recalled. Every strategic weapons platform is activated. We assemble overwhelming force. We travel to Krell space. We demand immediate surrender of War Master Zethar and every officer involved in the massacre. If the Krell comply, they face Earth's justice. If they refuse, we break their fleet, their military infrastructure, and their capacity to threaten human life for generations." "And their home world?" someone asked quietly. Cross did not look away. "If necessary." That drew breath from the room. Commander James Harmon was not present, but his private question already lived beneath the words Cross was saying now. At what point does deterrence become atrocity? At what point does justice stop being justice and become a new monster wearing the victim's face? Cross knew the shape of that question because he had been carrying it since the casualty numbers came in. He also knew something worse. The Krell had already answered it for them, not morally, strategically. By destroying escape pods, they had taught the galaxy that humans could be tested through the slaughter of civilians. By broadcasting it, they had invited imitation. If Earth replied with only procedure, then every ambitious predator species would update its calculations accordingly. A representative from the North American Union spoke again, more subdued this time. "Billions could die if this escalates." Cross nodded once. "And billions may die later if this does not." He brought Maya Chen's medical intake image onto the main display. Blanket around her shoulders, ash on her face, eyes too old for 9 years old. "This is what restraint bought us," he said. No one spoke after that. Secretary General Okonkwo stood. "We will vote." Hands did not rise slowly. They rose with the terrible swiftness of people who knew history would judge them whatever they did and had decided they would rather be judged for severity than for cowardice. Across the chamber, lights registered the tally in bands of green and red. 187 in favor, Okonkwo announced. 13 opposed. The motion passes. A stillness deeper than silence followed. It was the stillness of a door shutting. Okonkwo looked directly at Cross. "Admiral, you are authorized to execute Protocol Nightfall. You have the full resources of the Terran Defense Fleet, no engagement restrictions." Cross saluted once. "Yes, sir." "When do you depart?" "I need 3 weeks to assemble the fleet," Cross said. 3 weeks to turn grief into force. "And the Galactic Council," Cross's answer came without heat, which made it land harder. "Let them protest. We spent decades being good galactic citizens. We obeyed their laws. We trusted their systems. Our reward is floating in pieces over New Horizon." He turned not just to the Secretary General now, but to the whole chamber. "Starting today, Earth protects Earth. We will honor peaceful alliances. We will not threaten those who do not threaten us, but we will never again wait for permission to defend our people." The vote had ended. The war had not. But across human space, engines were already beginning to turn. Over the next 3 weeks, the galaxy watched humanity do something it had never done before. It stopped explaining itself. From colony lanes and patrol routes, from distant escort assignments and orbital defense grids, human warships turned and began moving toward Earth. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers, battleships, missile barges, escort screens, fleet tenders, logistics trains, hospital ships running dark behind armored walls. Civilian observers called it a mobilization. The Galactic Council called it destabilization. Along human networks, no one called it anything at all. Ships moved, orders propagated, dry docks lit up, ammunition stockpiles opened, reserve crews were recalled, old hulls were recommissioned. The entire machine of human war, neglected for years because diplomacy had been cheaper and kinder, woke up like something that had only been sleeping lightly. At the center of it all waited the flagship Retribution. Admiral Marcus Cross took command there on the day the final battle group arrived in Earth orbit. 200 warships assembled around the planet in layered formation, their running lights cutting through the darkness like a second constellation built out of anger and mathematics. On observation decks, civilians stood in silence and watched the fleet take shape. They were not cheering. This was too heavy for cheering. It felt more like witnessing a verdict become physical. The Galactic Council sent message after message. emergency appeals, demands for clarification, invitations to summits, warnings about treaty violations and interstellar consequences, and the need to preserve stability in a difficult moment. Earth responded once. "We're done talking." That single line spread through diplomatic channels like a systems failure. Some species panicked. Others pretended to remain neutral while quietly repositioning their own defensive assets in case human fury widened beyond the Krell. Trade powers offered mediation. Frontier governments offered intelligence. No one truly understood what would happen when a species known for restraint decided restraint had expired. The Krell thought they understood. On Krell Prime, War Master Zethar laughed when Council envoys urged apology and immediate surrender. He had 5,000 warships around his home system and centuries of conquest behind him. The humans, he was told, had assembled 200 ships. 200. To him it looked almost insulting. "They held meetings after we destroyed their station," he told his officers. "Now they come to threaten us with a fleet too small to matter." His court echoed his confidence because courts always did until the moment confidence became evidence of stupidity. On Earth, Maya Chen sat in a hospital room high above a city she had returned to without her mother. Doctors said her body was healing. No one said the same about anything else. She ate when reminded, slept in fragments, started awake at ordinary sounds. When people asked gentle questions, she answered them as if each word had to cross broken ground before reaching daylight. Admiral Cross visited her the night before departure. He found her sitting by the window with her stuffed animal in her lap, looking out at the lights of Earth and the faint stars beyond them. She turned when he entered, studying him with the directness children still possess when grief has burned politeness out of them. "You're the Admiral," she said. "Yes." "You're going to fight the Krell." Cross sat beside her bed. "Yes." She looked back toward the window. "My mom said Earth would come." For the first time in days, Cross had no prepared words. He had spoken before Council LS commanders and frightened governments. He had written operation orders that would move armies between stars, but this was different. This was one little girl asking whether the promise her mother died making had meant something real. "She was right," he said at last. Maya nodded as if she had expected no other answer. "People keep saying she was brave. She was. She didn't come back." The sentence was flat, plain, too simple to hide inside. Cross felt his throat tighten, but he did not look away. "No," he said. Maya's fingers tightened around the stuffed animal. "Will you kill them all?" It was not defiance, not hatred, just a child trying to understand the scale of adult consequences. Cross chose his words carefully because he would remember them later, whatever happened. "We are going to make sure no one can ever do this again." She was quiet for a moment. Then she leaned sideways and wrapped both arms around him with the suddenness only children have. The admiral, who had commanded fleets and buried sailors and stood unmoving through casualty reports that would flatten other men, closed his eyes. "Thank you," Maya whispered, "for remembering us." He held her carefully as if she might come apart in his hands. When he left the hospital, the fleet was already making final burn calculations. 2 days later, 200 human warships departed Earth in perfect formation and turned toward Krell space. The journey would take 3 weeks. Along the route, neutral governments tracked them at a distance and sent frightened reports home. In peaceful systems, ships moved aside. In tense ones, weapons powered up and then powered down again when captains studied the tonnage moving past and decided there were easier ways to die. Where council patrols demanded diversion for diplomatic review, Admiral Cross ignored them. Where merchant blocks offered mediation, he answered with silence. The fleet moved through the galaxy like a long-delayed thought finally carried to completion. By day 18, long-range sensors painted the truth ahead. 5,000 Krell warships massed around their homeworld, a wall of metal, a fortress of arrogance. On the bridge of the Retribution, Admiral Cross looked at the numbers, then at the officers around him. "Battle stations," he said, and for the first time since New Horizon burned, humanity stopped preparing. The battle for Krell Prime began with mathematics. 5,000 Krell warships formed a defensive sphere around their homeworld, layer after layer of armored certainty wrapped around a planet that had not seen true fear in 500 years. Their doctrine was simple because it had always been enough. Advance in mass, overwhelm with firepower, break the enemies will before strategy ever mattered. Against weaker species, it had worked so often that the Krell had mistaken repetition for mastery. Across from them hung 200 human warships. Too few if you counted the way the Krell counted. Admiral Marcus Cross stood on the bridge of the Retribution and watched the enemy formation spread across the tactical display like a wall. His officers were silent, not because they were afraid, though some were, not because they doubted the plan, though all of them understood the numbers. They were silent because they had crossed too much distance and buried too many dead to waste feeling on speeches. "Tactical," Cross said. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim did not look up from her station. 5,000 confirmed contacts, standard mass fire formation, heavy battleships forward, cruisers in layered support, fighters held in reserve. They're preparing to close and crush. They fight like gravity, Commander Holland said quietly. Only one direction, straight down, Cross nodded once. Then we teach them something lighter. The order went out. Wolf Pack Formation Delta. Across the human line, the fleet broke apart into 20 strike groups of 10 ships each. They spread wide, leaving gaps that looked like fear and weakness and poor discipline. On Krell bridges, commanders roared approval and pushed their ships harder, accelerating into those openings with predatory confidence. They thought the humans were fragmenting under pressure. They were committing. Range collapsed. Weapons lock screamed across human boards. Plasma fire began to flash from the leading Krell battleships, filling space with a storm of heat and metal. Human shields flared white-blue as impacts landed. A destroyer on the left flank took a direct hit and spun hard before recovering. Another lost half its sensor array. Crewmen on every bridge felt the old primitive instinct to fire back too early, to answer noise with noise and panic with motion. Cross waited. At 100 km, he still waited. At 50, with enemy fire painting the void and incoming telemetry flooding the command deck, he raised one hand and let the silence sharpen to a point. "Now," he said, the human fleet opened fire. The first Alpha strike tore through the Krell formation so violently that for several seconds their OWN tactical systems refused to believe the losses were real. Railgun rounds traveling at relativistic speeds punched through armor and kept going, killing multiple ships in a single line of destruction. Plasma lances sheared across battleship hulls and opened them like molten fruit. Quantum torpedoes phased through shields and detonated inside command cores. In 30 seconds, 200 Krell warships ceased to exist. The defensive sphere shattered. Then the wolf packs moved, not backward. The human ships dove into the ruptured formation in coordinated packs, hitting command vessels, sensor relays, and fire control ships first. Every strike group acted like a blade with 10 edges, cutting local coordination faster than the Krell could rebuild it. Where the enemy tried to mass, the humans vanished sideways and reappeared at a weak point. Where the enemy chased, the humans led them into converging kill zones. The Krell had spent centuries fighting species that collapsed under volume. They had never learned what happened when the smaller force was smarter. On his flagship, Warmaster Zether watched confusion become fear. "How are they doing this?" he demanded. His tactical officer's hands shook over the console. "Their weapons outrange ours. Their strike groups are targeting coordination nodes. We cannot hold formation. We cannot pin them down. Then bring reserves, crush them with numbers." But numbers were not a plan. Numbers were only comfort, and comfort burned quickly in a real war. 6 hours into the battle, 1,500 Krell ships were gone. Human losses stood at 18. Zether's flagship shuddered as a railgun impact gutted 3 lower decks. Warning lights washed the bridge in frantic hull breaches. Shield collapse on the port quarter. Fire spreading. Then, impossibly, a human destroyer appeared on the main screen at close range with a firing solution locked cleanly on his command section. For one frozen second, Zether believed he was dead. The destroyer did not fire. Instead, a voice came over the channel, calm and cold enough to feel like a hand around his throat. "Warmaster Zether, Admiral Cross sends his regards. You are not worth killing yet. Watch your fleet die first." Then the ship was gone. Zether understood in that moment that this was not simply defeat. It was instruction, the same lesson he had meant New Horizon to be. Only this time he was the audience. By hour 12, the Krell line had collapsed entirely. Surviving ships attempted retreat toward orbital defenses, but the human wolf packs hunted them down in methodical sweeps, crippling engines, destroying weapons, leaving wreckage in long-burning fields above the planet. The armada that had protected Krell Prime for centuries was reduced to fragments and drifting fire. The human fleet regrouped in high orbit. Below them, the planet turned in sullen blue-green arcs, still whole, still alive, still believing perhaps that distance might save it. Admiral Cross opened a channel. "Attention Krell Prime, your fleet has been defeated. Surrender Warmaster Zether and all officers responsible for the New Horizon massacre. You have 2 hours." The reply came from the Krell High Council: condemnations, claims of unauthorized action, offers of reparations, pleas wrapped in procedure. Cross cut them off. "I'm not here to negotiate, I am here to deliver justice." 2 hours passed. No surrender came. Cross looked through the viewport at the world below and thought of Maya Chen in a hospital room, of Sarah Chen dying in vacuum, of escape pods bursting like sparks against darkness because the Krell had wanted an example the galaxy would remember. He opened a final planetary channel. "You had civilians, so did New Horizon. You had warning. New Horizon had 47 minutes. Evacuate while you can." Then he gave the order, and above Krell Prime, humanity stopped being the species that asked permission.